The wind howled across the mountains like a wounded beast, carving its voice into the snow-drenched silence. The world had turned white, merciless, endless, and still. Against it, a figure stumbled, small and burdened, her arms wrapped tightly around a bundle swaddled in rags. Her breath came in ragged gasps, every step a defiance against the cold that gnawed at her bones. The infant in her arms was quiet, but she could feel its trembling to the layers of cloth, a feeble heartbeat that kept her moving when everything else in her had already given up. Her bare feet, cracked and blue, left fading impressions in the snow, quickly erased by the wind. A thin, torn cloak fluttered from her shoulders like a dying flame. Her long hair was tangled with frost, and her face, once soft, now rigid with pain, betrayed nothing but exhaustion. She hadn't spoken aloud in hours. There was no one to speak to. She had no name anymore. Names belonged to people who lived behind walls, who sat by fires and spoke of futures. She was something else now, just a mother and a child, surviving on scraps of memory and the stubborn refusal to die. She tripped on a buried root and fell hard, shielding the baby with her arms. Snow pressed into her mouth. Her eyes? For a moment, she didn't move. Just lay there, face down, body screaming in silence. Then the baby whimpered, a thin mewling sound that pierced her heart sharper than the cold ever could. She forced herself up, blinking ice from her lashes, and staggered forward again. Dusk was coming. The sky, once silver, bled into bruised purples. She knew she wouldn't last another night like this. There had to be shelter. Something. Anything. A crack in the rocks. A fallen tree. A ditch. She scanned the landscape with frantic eyes and found nothing but snow, rock, and sky. But she saw a small dip ahead, half hidden by a ridge. She slid down toward it, stumbling, and discovered a shallow hollow in the earth, partially shielded from the wind. It wasn't much, but it was enough. She crawled in, clutching the baby close, and collapsed into the frostbitten ground. Her fingers were barely responsive, but she pulled out a scrap of flint and dry moss from a pouch tied around her waist. Her hands shook so badly that sparks flew in every direction but where she needed them. Time passed. The baby whimpered again, then coughed, a thin, dry sound that terrified her more than any predator ever could. She forced her hands steady. Finally, a flame caught. It was small, flickering, feeble, but it lived. She fed it dry bark and brittle twigs scavenged days ago. The fire grew, licking upward, casting warm orange light onto the snow-packed walls of the hollow. She drew the baby close to it, pressing her own chest against his back. His skin was like paper, fragile and cold. She whispered to him then, just a little longer, just tonight. The child's eyes opened, dark and uncertain, and gazed into hers. For a moment, she saw something ancient in his stare, something that made her forget the cold, forget the pain. He blinked slowly, and a tiny hand curled around a lock of her hair. She wrapped what was left of the cloak around him, then pulled him to her breast. There was no milk, not anymore, but the nearness soothed him. His breathing slowed, shallow but steady. She smiled faintly and let her head fall back against the frozen wall behind her. Her thoughts wandered, drifting through memories blurred by hunger and loss. A stone hearth, a man's laughter, a cradle rocking gently in a warm room. Then screams, fire, betrayal. Faces twisted with fear and hatred. She ran. She kept running, until she couldn't remember what she was running from. Only that she had to keep the baby safe. She didn't know if she'd made the right choices. All she knew now was this fire, this tiny life in her arms, and the ache in her chest that wouldn't stop. Outside the hollow, snow began to fall again, gentle and soundless. Night crept in. The stars blinked coldly overhead. She looked at her child one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered, "but I can't go any further." The fire sputtered. Her eyes closed, and the world faded. Yet in that stillness, the baby stirred. A flicker of movement. A breath caught. A warmth approached, unfelt, unseen, but there, and just beyond the ridge, a shadow moved silently through the snow. The sound that roused her wasn't loud, just a subtle crackle of fire being fed, but it shattered the silence in her mind like glass. Her eyes opened slowly. For a moment, she didn't understand. The cold was still there, but it wasn't devouring her. There was warmth on her cheek, a steady heat. The fire was bigger now. It danced brighter, steadier, its glow casting long shadows against the rocks enclosing her. But she hadn't touched it since last night. Her limbs were too numb to move. Her child. She jerked upright with a gasp, heart pounding. He was still in her arms, tucked against her chest, but he no longer trembled. He was warm, warm. She touched his face, breath catching. Color had returned to his cheeks. He stirred beneath her touch, eyelids fluttering open. Relief broke over her like sunlight after endless night. But that meant her gaze lifted. A man sat just beyond the fire. He was crouched, tending to flames with practiced, silent movements. His coat, patched and thick, looked like it had been stitched together from years of scavenging. A fur line had shaded most of his face, but the jaw was rough with a dark beard in his hands, large, calloused, moved with precise care. He hadn't noticed her waking. Or maybe he had and chose to wait. She couldn't speak at first. Her throat felt scraped raw, her tongue heavy with dryness. When she finally managed words, they were little more than a whisper. "Who are you?" The man didn't look up. "Nobody," he said. Her fingers tightened around the child. "You followed me?" "No." He tossed another piece of dry wood into the flames. "I saw the smoke." That seemed plausible, but fear still crept in at the edges of her mind like frost under skin. People were dangerous. She'd learned that lesson with fire and blood. She adjusted her position subtly, putting her body between the man and the child. He noticed. "I'm not here to take anything from you." "Then why are you here?" The fire snapped between them. His gaze lifted slowly. His eyes were dark but not unkind, weary more than anything, like someone who walked a long, hard road and forgotten what it meant to arrive anywhere. "You were dying," he said simply. She didn't answer, didn't know how. The child fussed lightly in her arms, and she hushed him instinctively. The man's gaze flicked to the baby, then back to her. He didn't ask questions. That unsettled her more than if he had. "How long have you been out here?" he asked instead. She hesitated. 3 days since the last village. Maybe 4. He nodded once. "They ran you out." Not a question. A statement. She tensed. "You don't know me." "No, but I know that look." She didn't ask what look. She didn't need to. Instead, she pulled the cloak tighter around her child and stared into the fire. The silence stretched. Outside, the wind picked up again, brushing across the mountains like a whispering tide. The man stood finally, his movement slow but sure. He turned away from the fire, disappearing briefly behind a rock. When he returned, he held out a strip of dried meat and a pouch of water. She eyed them warily. "It's not poison," he said. "I didn't say it was." "You didn't have to." Still, her stomach ached with emptiness. She reached out slowly, took the offering, and ate with deliberate restraint, careful to save enough for the child. He watched her, not intrusively, but as if he were measuring something unseen. "You have a name?" he asked at last. She hesitated. "Lyra." He didn't offer his in return. The omission stung, though she couldn't explain why. "You're alone?" she asked quietly. "Yes." "For how long?" He didn't answer. When she looked at him again, the fire caught the side of his face. There were old scars near his jaw, partially hidden beneath the beard. Not war wounds. Animal, maybe, or punishment. She looked away. They spent the next hour in a silence that was not quite peaceful, but not hostile either. He reinforced the fire, added more rocks to shield the wind, then sat again on the opposite side. Lyra remained curled around the baby, her eyes never leaving him for long. The child had fallen asleep again, warmth finally returning to his tiny fingers. She touched his cheek with reverent softness, and for the first time in days, her shoulders loosened just slightly. "You came from the east?" the man asked suddenly. She nodded. "Not safe that way." "Nowhere is," she replied. He tilted his head. "You're not wrong." They didn't speak again that night. When the fire began to fade, the man wordlessly added another log. When the baby stirred and whimpered, He passed her a small, wrapped bundle, a bit of cloth heated by the flames. She tucked it beside the infant, grateful in silence. Eventually, exhaustion returned like a tide, dragging her under. But it didn't come with the same desperation as before. There was something different in the air now, something fragile but real. When she closed her eyes again, she did not expect to wake. But part of her wanted to. In the morning, the storm had passed. The sky overhead was bruised with dawn, streaked with pale fire. She stirred slowly, unsure what day it was or even what time meant anymore. The man was already awake, crouched beside the fire again, boiling snow in a battered tin pot. He looked up briefly, nodded. Lyra adjusted the baby in her arms. He looked better, stronger, alive. "You don't talk much," she said. "I say what needs saying." "And that's all." He shrugged. Talk never saved anyone. She considered that. It had a bitter truth to it. "You saved us." "I saw a fire. A mother, a baby. That's not saving. That's just not walking past." For the first time, she allowed herself to study him more openly. He didn't carry much, just a large pack, a heavy coat, a blade on his belt. Everything about him said experience, but not safety. She knew better than to trust that look. Yet something inside her, a quiet part untouched by fear, whispered that he meant no harm. Still, survival taught caution. And caution kept her alive this long. He handed her a crude wooden cup filled with warm snow water. She took it, fingers brushing his. The skin of his hand was rough, warm. "Thank you," she said quietly. He nodded. They sat together in silence as the mountains exhaled the night. And somewhere, far below in the valley, a thin trail of smoke rose from behind a distant ridge, unnoticed for now. But not for long. They moved at dawn. The fire had burned low, a soft glow in the snow-muted hollow, but the warmth it had lent to Lyra's body lingered in her bones like a memory. She cradled the baby, her son, her tether to a world that had taken everything else, and followed the man up the ridge, her legs still slow, untrusting. The mountains loomed around them, vast and white, swallowing sound and time. He didn't look back to see if she was keeping up, but his pace adjusted without a word. The man said little. He pointed, instead, toward game trails' shallow overhangs, the narrow slits in the rock where the wind passed through like the breath of gods. She followed, wary but compelled. In silence, the miles passed beneath their boots. By midday, they found a copse of pine trees nestled in a low valley, their green boughs sagging under snow. A trickle of water ran beneath the ice nearby, and the man knelt without prompting to clear a space for another fire. He worked with practiced rhythm, while Lyra rocked the child and watched him with something between suspicion and reluctant admiration. It had been days, and he still hadn't given his name. "You know everything else about me," she said, voice low but steady. "Why won't you tell me who you are?" He paused, hand stilling over a flint stone. Then quietly, "Because I don't know any more." Lyra stared. His eyes didn't meet hers. He struck the flint, and the sparks leapt. Flame followed. "That's not an answer. It's the only one I have." There was pain in the way he said it, buried deep beneath years of silence and survival. She said nothing more, letting the fire speak between them. The child stirred in her arms, and she murmured a lullaby under her breath. The words, unfamiliar now, hollow echoes of a life long gone. Later, after they had eaten from the man's sparse provisions and sat close to the fire under the darkening sky, he spoke again. "My name was Corin." Lyra looked at him sharply. "I had a wife," he said, "a daughter, before the winters turned long, before the sickness, before the rest of the world forgot how to be human." The firelight flickered against his face, highlighting the lines time had carved. "I kept them safe for as long as I could. But safety is just a delay sometimes, not a promise." Lyra waited. Corin said no more. Her fingers traced circles on the baby's back. "The baby's name is Emmerich." Corin nodded slowly. "He's strong. He shouldn't have lived. Not out here. Not with what I had left. But he did." She didn't reply. The fire crackled softly. In the silence, a different tension settled between them, not danger, but something heavier. a recognition. Two souls chipped away by suffering, still standing only because falling was an option. That night, they took turns sleeping. Corin watched the perimeter, eyes alert to any movement. Lyra dozed with Emmerich curled at her side, his tiny breasts warm against her neck. Dawn came muted, with a dull haze smearing the horizon. They continued their journey west. Each day, they traveled further from the memories that haunted them, though never far enough. Corin taught her how to set snares, how to test the ice before stepping. Lyra shared what she knew about plants, about hiding without leaving signs. They became, unknowingly, a rhythm. She didn't trust him, not completely, but she began to rely on him. And then they saw the smoke. It rose faintly against the sky, black and unnatural. Not a cooking fire. Something larger, controlled. Lyra's breath caught. Someone's nearby? Corin narrowed his eyes. That ridge. There's an old road on the other side. Could be traitors. Or worse. He nodded. We'll avoid it. But that night, while Corin went to gather wood, Lyra heard a rustle. She turned fast, clutching Emmerich against her. A figure stepped from the trees. Not Corin. Thinner, cloaked in tattered gray. A gleam of metal flashed at the belt. The stranger froze. So, did she? Easy, he said, raising a hand. Didn't mean to startle you. She said nothing. Her heart thundered. I saw your firelight. You alone? She shook her head slowly. My partner's nearby. He glanced into the woods. Good. Lot of people out here, not all friendly. What do you want? Food. Maybe trade, if you've got any. I've got some bandages, dried herbs. Good stuff. She eyed him uncertain. Then Corin stepped from the shadows behind the man. No trades tonight, he said calmly. The stranger turned too late. Corin's blade was already out, low and steady. His face was unreadable. The man raised both hands again, backing off. Didn't mean harm, just cold, hungry. Corin said nothing. He waited, unmoving. The man hesitated, then turned and disappeared into the trees. Lyra let out a long, shaking breath. He was lying. Probably. What if he comes back? Corin's eyes were hard. Then we won't be here. They packed quickly, abandoning the fire. The rest of the night they walked in silence. Corin leading, Lyra close behind, Emmerich bundled tight. Snow began to fall again, thicker now, as if the sky wanted to erase their tracks. By sunrise, they reached a narrow cave, just wide enough for shelter. Inside, it was dry and dark. They didn't speak until the fire was built again. Why didn't you just kill him? Lyra asked suddenly. Corin glanced up. I don't kill unless I have to. Even if he would have. He didn't answer. She studied him, trying to read what lay behind the stillness in his face. But his walls were too high. Do you think there's anywhere left that's safe? She asked. Not safe, just less dangerous. Is that where we're going? We're going where danger hasn't already burned the ground black. It wasn't hope, but it was something. That night, Corin gave her half of the dried meat, more than his share. She protested. He insisted. You need to feed the boy. I'll manage. He looked tired, more than usual, but he didn't complain. When Lyra lay down to rest, she watched him for a long time through the shadows. The man who had no name, then had one again, who didn't ask for trust, but kept giving reasons to offer it. She didn't understand him, but she didn't fear him anymore. Outside the cave, the wind changed direction, and somewhere in the trees, the stranger from before watched the dark mouth of the cave with cold, patient eyes. The night broke with sound. Not thunder, not wind, a crack, sharp, deliberate, unmistakably human. Lyra bolted upright, her heart slamming into her throat. The fire in the cave had burned low, casting long shadows. Emmerich stirred against her chest, and she pressed him tighter to her body, silencing his whimper. Corin was already standing, sword in hand, posture taut. His eyes locked with hers for a second. No words passed between them, but she understood. Be ready. A second crack echoed beyond the cave. Closer, then silence. Corin moved like a wraith to the edge of the cave, crouched low against the stone. Lyra followed, clutching Emmerich in one arm. Her fingers curled around the bone-handled knife he had given her 2 nights ago. Outside, the snow glowed faintly beneath the pale starlight, undisturbed. Nothing moved. Then a voice. Didn't want it to be like this. It floated through the trees, too calm, too composed. A voice she recognized. The stranger from the forest. You had your chance to share your fire, he called. Could have traded. Could have helped. Corin didn't move. Lyra's breath fogged in the cold air as she crouched behind him. Every muscle in her body screamed to run. But where? In the dark with a child? Suicide. I've got men, the stranger said. 3. Good shots. Cold makes them cruel. I'd say walk out and hand over what you've got, but I know you won't. Corin glanced back at her, lips barely moving. If something happens, run north. Use the ridgeline. Don't look back. No. Lyra. She shook her head. You'll die. Not if I can help it. But if I do, don't waste it. Another crack. This time not a warning. A gunshot. It struck the cave wall, sending stone shrapnel into shadows. Emmerich began to cry. Corin surged forward before the echo faded. He vanished into the darkness like smoke. Lyra clutched Emmerich, backing deeper into the cave. The fire was dead now, the light gone. Only sound remained. She heard grunts, a scuffle, snow shifting under bodies. Then silence. Then another shot. She waited, unable to breathe, unable to move. Her whole world had narrowed to the space of a cave and the weight of her child. Footsteps crunched outside. She raised a knife. Lyra! Corin's voice came low. She didn't move. You alone? Yes. He stepped into view. Blood stained his coat, a dark smear over his shoulder. His breath came fast, ragged. What happened? 2 dead. 1 ran. Stranger's gone. She rose slowly. You're bleeding. It's not deep. But she could see the pain in the way he held himself. Still, he knelt and touched Emmerich's head lightly. He's quiet. That's good. She set the boy down on the blanket and helped Corin to sit. The cave had gone cold again, but neither of them had the strength to rebuild the fire. She worked quickly, tearing cloth to bind his shoulder. You shouldn't have gone alone, she whispered. I had to. If they found you... His eyes closed briefly, pain flickering across his face. He saw you. He knew you had a child. That made you a target. I'm always a target, she said. Corin didn't argue. They stayed there until light returned, filtering softly through the cave mouth. The air outside was bitter, but still. Peaceful, for now. Corin stood with effort, his movements slower than usual. Lyra packed what little they had left, her hands shaking more from exhaustion than fear. They left the cave behind as quietly as they'd entered it days before. No one followed them. No shots rang out. The mountains opened into a long valley. Frozen trees dotted the path like ancient sentinels. In the far distance, faint smoke curled against the horizon, but not the black smoke of raiders. This was thinner, blue-gray. A village, maybe? A chance. Corin hesitated. We could try there. Lyra stared. And if they turn us away? Then we keep walking. She looked down at Emmerich. His eyes, bright and curious, blinked up at her. He was heavier now, healthier, stronger. A miracle. You could go alone, she said. I won't. She studied him. Why? Corin's expression didn't change. Because you saved me. You saved us. Not the same. They didn't speak again as they walked. By mid-afternoon, they reached the edge of the woods. Beyond it, nestled in a curve of hills, sat a collection of buildings. Stone, smoke rising from the chimneys, movement in the fields. People. Lyra's heart raced. This was the moment. Again. Corin stopped beside her. You ready? No. He nodded. Me neither. They stepped out of the trees. Voices rose. Shouts. A figure appeared from one of the buildings. Then another. Lyra froze, clutching Emmerich. Her legs threatened to buckle. But no one drew a weapon. No one shouted threats. Instead, one of the figures, A woman wrapped in furs stepped forward. She looked tired, but not cruel. "You travelers?" Corin answered, "Yes, we mean no harm." "Not many do at first," the woman said. Her gaze drifted to Emmerich. "That your child?" Lyra nodded slowly. The woman's voice softened. "Come inside. Warm up. Talk after." Lyra couldn't move. Relief warred with disbelief. She didn't trust it. Couldn't. But the warmth of a real fire, the smell of bread, the chance to sit without fear. Her knees gave out beneath her. Corin caught her. They walked into the village together. No promises. No guarantees. Just a door opening instead of closing. And for the first time in what felt like eternity, Lyra took a breath that didn't hurt.